Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new season of the Spanish Football Podcast. I'm Phil Kitromilides. Sid Lowe is with me as ever, and he's joining me from a hotel room in Bilbao, starting the season as he means to go on, travelling all over Spain in somewhat extreme fashion to bring you the best possible coverage of Spanish football. Hello, Sydney.
Good morning, Phil. How are you?
I'm good. I'm not as tired as you are. I haven't done quite as much as you have this weekend. I'm going to tell the listeners a little story. This is what Sydney got up to this weekend. He was on holiday, in theory, on the east coast of Spain in the region of Valencia. He got a train to Seville on Saturday to see Seville against Rayo. Then on Saturday, he flew on Sunday morning, very, very early, flew up to Bilbao. From Bilbao, got a bus to Santander to watch Racing Santander against Villarreal. Then got a bus back to Bilbao to stay there this evening. This morning, Sid, what are you doing?
Well, I'm currently writing, and then I will be getting a flight to Santiago de Compostela. From Santiago, I'll get a train to A Coruña to see Deportivo's first game back in the First Division. And then I will get a flight back to the East Coast via Madrid tomorrow.
A flight via Madrid?
Yes, with a 6 hour layover in Madrid.
Wow.
Okay. So what I'm trying to decide is whether it's worth leaving the airport, which is definitely worth leaving the airport to go somewhere that's not the airport, but whether I can actually get home and back for a couple of hours.
Okay. I mean, once again, I'm just sort of left with the overwhelming feeling of that I wish I loved anything as much as you love covering Spanish football. So there we go.
You sounded disappointed with me. You see, I felt I had to do this when I pointed out that the logistics of this meant I might not be able to do the full-on 3-day trip, and it might have to stop at 2. And you sounded quite disappointed with me. So that kind of spurred me on to that extra effort to make sure I could do this.
I'm glad I still have that effect on you, Sid, after 14 seasons. This is our 14th season of doing the podcast. So if you've been along for the ride since the beginning, you're very welcome along. If you are a new listener, you're also very welcome along indeed. We'll be doing this every week throughout the season. Monday podcast, reviewing the weekend's action. Friday podcast, looking ahead to what's coming up at the forthcoming match day. I've got lots of stuff to tell you, dear listeners. It's the start of a new season. But I think we'll start off by going through what's happened so far in La Liga. Match day 1, it's very much not a full set of results. These are the results that we have so far. The first game of the season was Alaves against Getafe. Interesting choice. Alaves won 3-0. Impressive from Quique Sanchez Flores' side. Sevilla beating Rayo by 2-1. Game that you were at, Sid, a game I desperately don't really want to talk about at all, but I'm afraid we're going to have to. Racing and Villarreal playing out a very entertaining 2-2 draw. You were there. And Espanyol beating Levante 3-0. Tonight we've got Deportivo La Coruña against Elche, and on Wednesday we've got Atletico Madrid against Malaga. Next week we've got Valencia, Betis, Real Madrid, Real Sociedad, Celta, Osasuna and Barca against Athletic. Sid, why is Matchday 1 so shambolically incomplete?
Essentially, it's very simple, which is that the rules of what would you call it? I suppose the labour agreement, and I love the way that Spanish football does this, and it still talks about things in very kind of almost Marxist terms of the workers against the owners. Anyway, the labour agreement essentially is that the players who've been at the World Cup have to have a certain amount of rest time. So rather than just waiting a week, which is what every other league did, Spain said, well, no, we're going to go ahead with it. But if you've got enough players who've reached the semi-final or onwards, you can be allowed to wait. What I do not understand, and I assume there must be a reason, but there actually isn't, is why Atletico Madrid have been forced to play their game on Wednesday, and Madrid and Barcelona and Athletic and Real Sociedad and everyone else wait a following week.
There is a reason, Sid.
Please tell me.
I found it out last night. There is a concert at the Metropolitano next week.
I did not know that. Who's playing?
The Weekend.
The Weekend, right.
Yeah.
Next week at the weekend. Is the concert at the weekend?
Yeah.
No, that's good then. Okay.
Yeah, it is at the
I'd
weekend.
be disappointed if the weekend were playing in midweek. I mean, that would be very La Liga if that was the case. It would be a very La Liga way of doing it, wouldn't it? If the weekend were playing in midweek, that would be very much Spanish football's perfect identity.
It does feel pretty strange to be starting the podcast with a very incomplete set of results. And let's, be frank about this. The big boy's not playing yet.
Well, I mean, one way of looking at it, Kitro, and I don't want to do this, is that yesterday Real Madrid played a friendly, and in media terms, that was bigger than the start of La Liga.
Yeah,
and that's a problem.
Yeah, it was. It was absolutely number one story on the web pages that cover Spanish football, etc., etc. But not the number one story here, Sid.
100% not. I don't even know what Real Madrid did. All I know is I was disappointed that it didn't finish Schalke 0, Real Madrid 4, because then we'd have had a scoreline that says Schalke 0-4, 0-4, Real Madrid.
You would have loved that, and you and many other people as well, with a particular form of OCD. We aren't going to talk about that, but Real Madrid did win their friendly. Barcelona also played a friendly yesterday against Basel, and they won it as well. We are going to talk about the games that you were at, but before we get to that, just want to tell you about our Patreon, because that's where you need to go to get more content about Spanish football, loads more. Patreon.com/TSFP from just €4.75 a month. It's even cheaper with annual membership. Patrons get the Monday and Friday pods without any adverts, plus the Q&A pod on a Tuesday and a bonus pod on Thursdays. And we're launching a new bit of content this season, the TSFP Daily. From Monday to Friday, you will get a daily roundup of the biggest stories in Spanish football. So if you want to keep right up to date with everything that is happening, Monday to Friday, the TSFP Daily is what you need. Come and join us, patreon.com/TSFP. All right, Sid, let's talk about the games that you were at. You went to Seville. You went to the Estadio Ramon Sánchez Pizjuán to see Sevilla come from behind to beat Rayo by 2-1. Rayo were 1-0 up at half-time. They were the better side in the first half. Sevilla were really, really atrocious. A slightly strange team selection from Luis Garcia Plaza, certainly leaving some of his better players on the bench. Second half, they turned things round with 2 penalties. How poor were Sevilla for a big chunk of this game? Because at the start of the season, I was saying that they're in trouble. They've sold a lot of players. They've lost a lot of goals. They haven't replaced them with players that are as good. It's not a happy place. It hasn't been there for a while. And the first half just confirmed everything that I was thinking.
Absolutely, it did. The first half, you're sitting there thinking they are really in trouble. Luis Garcia, the coach, had been saying in the pre-match press conference, and I think it didn't go down well with everybody, because it's not really the message that manager usually goes for pre-season. But he came up with what he described as a very realistic message, but it was seen as a bit of a pessimistic one. He was saying, look, we have to recognise where we are. We have to recognise the limitations we've got, that our squad isn't big enough at the moment. We haven't got enough players, that we have the financial limitations that we've got. He went on this discourse where he said, it's not just that we go to a first division team and ask about a player and they say a fee and we go, oh, can't pay that. It's that we go to second division teams and we ask about a fee and they tell us what a player costs and we go, oh, can't pay that. So we can't compete with some of these other clubs. I think there's a recognition that they're actually doing reasonably good work in the transfer window, given the limitations that they've got. But those limitations are very significant. And Luis Garcia was trying to say pre-game, look, we have to be aware of where we are. We have to see this as a fight for survival from the very start. We have to have that mindset, because otherwise this will go wrong. And in that first half, you thought, wow, this is really, really bad. They actually started for 4 or 5 minutes, and I know 4 or 5 minutes isn't anything, but there was kind of an impetus about them. I thought, oh, here we go. At least at home, maybe they're going to have something. And then once Rayo took control of the ball, Sevilla didn't get anywhere near them. Garcia said after the game that they'd actually been surprised by the way that Sevilla played, and in particular by the way that Sevilla pressed. And he said, and they had a player, the structure of the way they pressed us was completely different, and we just couldn't deal with it. We couldn't get hold of the ball. We couldn't keep the ball.
The way that Rayo pressed.
The way that Rayo pressed. Yeah, we couldn't get hold of the ball. We couldn't keep the ball. We couldn't hold on to it because they were coming at us from places that weren't the places we'd worked on. And he said, so what happened at halftime is they made the changes of Robbie Earl came on, and Peque in particular, I thought was brilliant in the second half. Really, really good. Came on. But what that did was it changed the structure of the team as well. And they did start to get hold of the ball. It wasn't just the 2 penalties. Admittedly, the 2 penalties, without those, they wouldn't have found a way through. But they were much, much better in the second half, Sevilla. And you're right, it is tempting, isn't it, to look at the second half and go, well, this was as simple as putting your good players on the pitch, the ones that weren't on the pitch at the start. Now, I think there's an element of truth in that. But, the performance of Peque, for example, we've not seen that from him a huge amount for Sevilla. So, you could understand why, all right, he turned out to be the best player on the pitch, but he wouldn't necessarily be. So Robbie Earl came on and I thought played very well indeed, and gave them something different as a centre forward. Gave them a kind of a movement that they didn't have and a presence they didn't have and someone they could play to and play off. And I thought that was really, really important. But then, of course, it's natural that he didn't start. He'd only trained the night before. He'd only had one training session with his team.
Yeah. He was in mid-season though. With
Yes, I know, but what Luis Garcia put it quite nicely actually post game. He said, when you put someone on the pitch who's only had one training session with you, he said it's genuinely a case he doesn't know his teammates. And he said, so for example, Joaquin Osso goes up the wing, and you've got a centre forward who doesn't know if this guy's going to cross early or late, if he's going to cut back, if he's going to put the ball in, when to make the movement. He said, so some of those mechanics that you need just aren't there. Although actually it turned out they kind of were there, and he played pretty well. And I thought Sevilla were much improved in the second half.
What about Rayo, who should have been 2-0 up? Randy and missed an absolute sitter, and then just didn't really do anything in the second half.
No, nothing at all. But he missed a sitter, and of course you had the second goal from Missy Palathon as well, which was ruled out for a foul in the build-up. And I think that's actually a little bit harsh, because basically Issy's running through the middle as the attack is building on the right-hand side, and the defender tries to barge him, tries to sort of push him out of the way, and Issy effectively throws him off, and that's the foul that's given. And I felt a bit sorry for Issy, because it is true that he does put his arm around the shoulder or around the neck almost of the defender. I can't remember which defender it is now, but it's certainly not him. It's certainly not him that instigates the contact. Anyway, the point is that Rayo were in a position where they could have had the game really exactly where they wanted it. And you're right, they just disappeared in the second half. There was just nothing there at all, really.
Nada de nada. Going to be a long old season for Rayo. It is Monday morning.
I fear it might be, yeah.
They have their first home game of the season on Thursday against Alaves. We have no idea where it's going to be played. There is no official news as to where it's going to be played. If you've missed the story, their stadium, which is owned by the local government, who have revoked Rayo's license to be able to use it because of the deplorable conditions that they've kept it in. And it's an absolute shambles. But anyway, more on that, I'm sure, in other podcasts. Tell me about your magical trip to Santander, Sid. Racing Santander racing into a 2-0 lead against Villarreal, and playing really quite well for the first they played well for pretty much the whole game, to be honest. But then they conceded 2 goals in a minute right at the end of the first half. It finished 2-2 at the end of the first half. It finished 2-2 at the end of the second half. Sid, what was it like being there?
I thought it was brilliant. First time back, as you say, in 14 years. In that period, they spent a run of 7 years where they spent 6 of them in Segunda B, which is Spain's third tier, which is always referred to here as being not professional football, because institutionally it's run by the federation, not by the league, so it doesn't count as professional football. Now, those players are professionals and they do get paid, although not always. This is part of Rayo's story, Racing's story, that they've had players be unpaid. They had a huge debt. They've had 2 of their presidents have been to prison. A third president has been sentenced to prison but didn't actually go. They've had this huge financial and institutional crisis. Basically, as the fact that people have gone to prison tells you, they've been run by crooks at times. They've been run by false idols and false saviors that made things worse and then disappeared. They've been on the verge of disappearance a few times. There was that very famous Copa del Rey game where the players walked onto the pitch and refused to play. And the referee said, "You're definitely doing this." Yep. And they walked away again. And they were supported by the fans in that, because it was seen as a gesture of dignity, that we can't carry on like this. They have Jose Alberto is their coach, who took over 4 years ago, and he's completely changed them. But the thing that's changed him institutionally is the arrival of a new owner, essentially a mathematician, an Argentinian mathematician called Sebastian Theria, and there is a stability about them now. And one of the really important things, and this for me really brings back a sense of what happened at Oviedo as well, that those years of suffering actually make you stronger in the end, partly because one of the things they've done is create, if you like, a mobilization of the city. You feel that sense that the people feel like participants in this now. They feel that they've got a role, and that makes them stronger, I think. And it means that everywhere in Santander yesterday, everyone was wearing Rayo shirts. It was a real feel of occasion. Now,
Racing,
I know you get
Racing.
What did I say?
Rayo.
Did I say Rayo again? Sorry. You get a real sense of occasion, a real sense that the city's in there. And I know you get this with the first game back in the first division for any club. But I think that is part of Racing's success. The atmosphere in the stadium was fantastic. It's a very kind of old school sort of 90s stadium, brick built, a perfect circle. And it was great. And they do play good football. And they're very keen to play front footed. They're very keen to go for you. They use the ball well. And I would actually agree with you. As you said, they basically play well for the whole game. And that is to disagree with their manager. Their manager said, once we tired, we couldn't do it anymore. In the second half, we were under pressure a bit. And it is true that in the second half, a little bit, Villarreal started to make things happen. But I actually thought one of the things that was interesting for me was that in the second half, even when they're under pressure, they came away from that 3 or 4 times and had 3 or 4 good breaks where they could have created chances. And in moments under pressure, we then started to see the quality of a handful of players. And in particular, Inigo Vicente and Sergio Canales, who, when the game was stretched and the players were tired, Canales' ability to hold on to the ball, I thought was really striking. I thought he played very well.
Still got it, Sergio Canales at the age of 35, 16 years after he left Racing, he's back. He said afterwards, it's kind of surreal. It still hasn't really sunk in that I'm back here, but he is back and he was very good. Tell you what, their left back, Jorge Salinas, like the look of him. And obviously a lot of other people like the look of him as well, because he's been linked with the move to Barcelona and Atletico Madrid. People are keeping their eyes on him. He's only 19 and he's a very exciting looking player as well. So
the manager said after the game, he said, look, it feels like every time people ask me about there's a handful of players who potentially could be bought. He said, it's when you ask me about players who might leave, because I'm talking about them, it feels like we're trying to sell them. I don't want to sell them. He said, but there is a reality. They have a buyout clause that is eminently reachable for other clubs. And so, yes, there is a very significant risk that at least a couple of their players might go before the transfer window ends.
Villarreal scored 2 absolute golazos, Pap Gay, and a brilliant one from Nicolas Pepe. First game under Inigo Perez. Remember, last season they finished 3rd, but they were 17th in terms of average possession. They played a very different style under Marcelino. Inigo Perez's Rayo side were 4th in average possession. That's just one metric in which we expect Villarreal to differ this season. They looked like they wanted to press a little bit higher up the pitch as well than last season, which wouldn't have been hard.
Yeah, and also they wanted to bring the ball out from the back, which is of course where one of the Racing goals came from. And Inigo was asked about this after the game, and we know that this is a risk that you're going to take. We know that you're going to keep doing it. How do you stop it happening? And he said, well, look, we'll analyse why it went wrong. He said, but I'm not worried about it, particularly because the mistake came from Juan Foyth. So this is a player that I'm sure if we look at his I think the phrase he used was his index of mistakes will be very low. And so, it can happen. I didn't think they were great, but I do think that even then they created a handful of good chances and Julen made 3 or 4 very good saves. I tell you what, yet again, I don't want to say the same thing that we always say, but when Gerard Moreno came on the pitch, what a lovely footballer he is. And it's just a pity that he's injured a lot and that you don't really anticipate him being a starter for most of the season, because the smoothness, the vision, the kind of passes that he pulls out of nowhere, he's just a brilliant footballer.
Certainly is. So that's Racing 2, Villarreal 2 at El Sardinero, where Sydney was at.
Now, our episode of TSFP today, Phil, is brought to you by our friends at NordVPN.
Yes, it's a new season, but one thing hasn't changed. We, and mainly you, do a lot of travelling covering Spanish football.
Yeah, it feels to be a little bit like I've only just got back from the World Cup, because it is only just got back from the World Cup. And this weekend, there's games in Sevilla, in Santander, and in A Coruña.
When you travel, the best way to make sure you've got access to all your content from back home is using NordVPN.
For football, TV shows, movies, for football mostly, let's face it. NordVPN allows you to access your subscriptions from back home, wherever you are.
It's really easy to use, which is good if you're not good with technical stuff like us.
I have actually proven this to myself. Yes, it is very easy to use, fortunately. It also helps with your internet security, which is very important if you spend a lot of time using public Wi-Fi, like train stations and airports and hotels like this one.
You connect with just one click. It's one of the fastest VPNs around, and you can use up to 10 devices with one account. For more information, this is really important. You need to head to nordvpn.com/TSFP.
And there's a 30-day money-back guarantee, and you also get 4 extra months for free. So if you could just tell me that link again, Philip, I will write it down.
You can find it in the show notes, nordvpn.com/TSFP. Now, I know everybody's desperate to hear about our thoughts on Alaves against Getafe and Espanyol against Levante. Before we get to that, we should discuss some pretty big transfer news, which has been taking place over the last couple of days. Atletico Madrid signing Cuti Romero, which is a big signing for him and for them.
Yep.
And last night, we're getting the news that Rodri to Barcelona is very, very close to being done. It's going to be official today. Ferran leaving, of course, for a PSG. That also happened a couple of days ago as well. The Rodri news, Sid, it's big. It's a deal that we expected to go through. It looks like Barcelona are going to pay a little bit more than what they wanted to, but essentially the deal is probably going to be worth about 70 million euros in terms of add-ons that will probably be achieved, which is a lot for an injury-prone 30-year-old midfielder, or not very much for one of the best Spanish midfielders of all time?
Yeah, I like the way you frame that, because actually both of those things are true, aren't they? It does, to be honest, to me, it feels like quite a lot.
It's quite a lot for them for a position that they didn't necessarily need.
Exactly.
It's been sold as an oportunidad de mercado, a chance that's too good to miss, but at the same time, it's a lot of money when you need to stretch. Like, they need a centre forward, they need to sign a centre back as well. They haven't signed a centre back. Those were the two positions that they were supposed to reinforce, and instead they've gone out and got Rodri, who is brilliant and who will improve their team. But it does seem like a hefty chunk of money to spend in a position where you weren't thinking to reinforce.
Exactly. I completely agree with you that on the face of it, this wasn't a priority. Which isn't to say it's not a good signing. It isn't to say that he won't be a success. I have one or two doubts about how it all fits together, but those are doubts that I think are very minor and will almost certainly be overcome pretty quickly. I think it is a lot of money. I suppose one way of looking at it would be to say that, because it's not just the fact that he's of his age and how many injuries he's had. It's also that this was the last year of his contract. So it feels like quite a lot, essentially, for one season. Now, admittedly, that's a little bit false, because when you get a player for free, you end up having to give him a bigger signing on bonus. So you're kind of giving him some of what you would be paying in a transfer fee. That tends to be the way it works. But it is a good signing for them. It doesn't resolve the attacking issues. I think there is a feeling as well, and maybe it's a little bit petty, this, but there is, I think, an extra sort of level of enjoyment with this, because the assumption was that he was going to Real Madrid. And so I think there's that sense that, wow, we got a really good player. And also we took away from Real Madrid the really good player that they most needed.
That's what Jorge Valdano said, 30 million to sign him and 40 million for Real Madrid not to.
Oh, that's quite a nice way. Right, there you go. That's a very nice way of putting it. Yeah.
Yes. So they get him and Real Madrid don't. They do need a striker. It's not going to be Julian Alvarez. That just doesn't look like it's going to happen.
I just don't see how you make it happen.
No. Which means
conditioning factors
that they're being linked with other profiles of strikers now who are, let's say, a level down. The like of Luis Suarez, not that one, the Colombian.
No, I actually wonder which one would be better for them. I wonder if the original Uruguayan one might be a better choice.
The original Uruguayan one probably can't walk at the moment now.
I think his knees are probably not really in the best of conditions.
The mighty Vangelis Pavlidis from Benfica. I mean, some strikers that wouldn't have been high up on the list at the start of the summer. Let's put it like that. They need to sign someone. Let's see who they end up going for.
I mean, we talked about this actually at the very start of the summer, and it's becoming more and more applicable now. Is you just wonder whether they might be going down a slightly PSG style route where all of the forwards are wingers, even the ones that play through the middle. And that this is going to be just really an attempt to be really, really relentless. And that maybe we see. Go on.
Did you see yesterday in the friendly against Basel, Anthony Gordon was in theory the central
and I think he's possibly the one that I mean, and yesterday's friendly will confirm this. I confess I didn't watch it, obviously. Would confirm this. I felt that he was the one most likely. There was a lot of talk of Lamine, and I think Lamine definitely wants to end up in the middle, or more to the point, thinks he will end up in the middle, and actually thinks that he'll have less players on him if he's in the middle because he's got more places that he can go. But I'm not sure that's something for now. I think it's an evolution that will happen at some point, though.
Cuti Romero to Atletico Madrid. I mean, this is How can I? Feels like this is a massive signing, a huge signing, one of the best defenders in the world. I'm not letting my Spurs bias get the better
Well,
of me.
surely your Spurs bias would have you say, well, this guy's not that good because you're one of the best defenders in the world. Yeah, but so good that he was leading a defense that almost had you relegated.
According to Lionel Messi, Lionel Messi says that he's the best centre back in the world.
I hope Lionel Messi is not becoming the new Pelé, where he'd be an absolutely wonderful footballer saying very stupid things.
Well, it's not that stupid.
No, it's not. No, it's not. He is very, very good, and I think it does feel like a big signing. Should we try and deal with this in the same way that we're dealing with Barcelona and actually maybe even with Real Madrid, though, and say it is a good signing, and on the face of it, he will absolutely be a starting central defender for them. But again, was it the priority at Atletico Madrid?
Well,
I mean, was centre back really something they desperately needed?
No, but obviously with Jose Jimenez, you cannot rely on him at all. So yes, they've got Lenormand, who fell out of favour, Hanchko and Pubil, who are very decent. But now the suggestion is that he's going to go to a back three with wing backs.
Well, that certainly makes sense on the right hand side with Marcos Llorente
and Grimaldo.
And Grimaldo, I suppose it makes sense as well. Yes, and actually, I wonder if Grimaldo might actually be the more important of the two signings in terms of what it does to them, what it allows them to change. That said, it feels a little bit like they've been signing left backs for years and none of them quite work. I wonder if actually there's an element of that. I don't want to overplay this, but is there an element of that with centre back that he gets a new centre back, then he's not entirely sure? Then the one, for example, Pubil was the one that Simeone didn't really chase. It was the club that bought Pubil. And at first he wasn't really playing him. They thought, oh, actually, he's really quite good. I agree with you. I like Hanko. I like Hanko as a ball-playing central defender. And I actually think he is suited to the left-hand side of a back three.
Well, and Pubil potentially on the right-hand side of a back three because he was signed as a right back. Never played centre-back. And it was Diego Simeone who turned him into a World Cup winning centre-back. So let's see how Cuti Romero gets on. You are right, though. And perhaps there is an element as well of him joining Atletico Madrid and not joining Barcelona as well, who are said to be interested in him as well. All right, that's the transfer news. A lot more on that in the next 2 weeks before the transfer window closes. The two games that we haven't spoken about from yesterday: Alaves 3, Getafe 0. Sid, Mariano Diaz scored a goal in a professional game of league football for the first time in 4 years, and he also gave 2 assists.
I know, it's absolutely insane. I was going through his statistics yesterday, like properly going through them. In the league last year, 10 games, no goals, no assists. The season before, an entire season out. He was out of the game, literally out of the game. The season before that in the league, no goals, no assists. The season before that in the league, no goals, no assists. The season before that in the league, 1 goal, 1 assist. The season before that in the league, 1 goal, no assists. The season before that, 1 goal, no assists. Like this shouldn't happen. And I'm going to be honest here, and I'm going to be honest about what is possibly my cruelness, and I shouldn't do this. I could not believe he'd been given another opportunity to even play this season. Like I genuinely, when Alaves took the decision and included him in the squad and gave him the opportunity to keep playing, it's like, at what point is someone just going to go, just no?
Yeah.
And then he turns up on the first day, comes on, plays 33 minutes, and he's absolutely brilliant.
They had given him a 2-year contract, so he had 1 more year left on his contract. Sanchez Flores took him under his wing and had a little chat with him apparently this week, and said he was going to be important and to forget the past, not worry about the future, just to focus on the present. Said he was going to be important, and so proved the case.
Yeah, it really is extraordinary. And last year he walked out of a training session because he wasn't given a starting player's bib. So in other words, he took that to mean that he wasn't going to play in the Copa del Rey games, because actually the Copa del Rey is the one place where he's been able to play a little bit over recent years because he's not had a lot of minutes. The curious thing about this is that he's not had a lot of minutes, and this is where the contradiction lies in all of this. He's not had a lot of minutes over the last few years. And after this game, he said, these have been difficult times for me. There was anger in my celebration. This was me trying to prove a point. And how do I put this nicely, Phil? He's not had a lot of minutes, and it's often felt like he's not really been that worried about not having a lot of minutes. So that idea of rebellion against your fate, I really hope that this is the beginning of him being engaged, because in terms of talent, in theory, he's quite good. But to be honest, It's 6 years. Which year was it? It was 2017-18 when he was at
Lyon.
Lyon, wasn't it? And scored 18 goals.
Then
And you
Madrid
think,
brought
wow,
him back
Madrid
the
brought him
year
back. We
that
thought this is a
Cristiano
great
Ronaldo
player.
leaves. Gave him the number 7 shirt. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Do
you know what? I'd forgotten that. I'd forgotten that he'd been given the number 7 shirt. And so everyone's thinking, wow, maybe this. I mean, admittedly, in one of those seasons where he only gets one goal, that one goal was in a Clasico. I can't remember which season it is.
I think it was that was just before the pandemic, and I think it was quite deflected as well. But listen,
yeah, it was a deflected fluke late on in a Clasico, but he did get it, sort of.
He did. Congratulations to Mariano Diaz and Alaves starting very well. Very poor result for Getafe, and Espanyol beating Levante 3-0. Very, very poor performance from Levante and Espanyol with 2 goals for Bobby Fernandez up front.
Are we taking him as the new Chicago cop?
He's not Chicago. He's San Diego PD. Bobby.
Is he San Diego PD? I like it.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. But yes, that's Roberto Fernandez for new listeners to the podcast who don't know what we're talking about. Sometimes I will make weird things up about people's names. There we go. That's the only way.
I think you're undoing you're under recognizing your power here, Philip.
Yes.
You want to do weird things about the name and essentially create a future for them.
Because he used to go on and on about Robert Lewandowski being Bobby Lewandowski, Chicago PD. And where does Robert Lewandowski moves to? He moves
Chicago
to
PD.
Chicago
Maybe not PD, but certainly Chicago. Chicago Fire is a great name for Chicago PD renegade cop. In fact, the title of his series should be Bobby Lewandowski, Chicago Fire.
Yes. Well,
what's the rule book ever done for me?
It may well be, but there we go. So that's what's happened on the first weekend of the season so far. Sydney's going to Deportivo La Coruña Elche this evening, and in the Segunda, it was an absolutely abysmal game between Oviedo and Granada. Drew 0-0. Granada, in truth, weren't very interested in playing much football or making anything happen. So very little did happen in that game. 0-0. Elsewhere, Real Mallorca beat Valladolid 2-0, and Girona drew 1-1 with Leganés. Go and check out the Leganés goal, by the way. It is an absolute banger, top bins from 35 yards out. A fantastic goal. So there we go. Thanks very much for joining us on this first Spanish football podcast of this season. As we said, we'll be back here every single Monday and also every single Friday, looking ahead to what's coming up at the weekend. Sydney, enjoy the delights of La Coruña when you get there, because you've got quite a little epic trip before you manage to get there. So enjoy, and we'll speak soon, my friend. Adios.
Cheerio.